We are getting ready to move on in this intriguing story. We've already been through the hot, steamy part. Now we're going to get into the intrigue part. This is where it really gets fun. So let's begin with a word of prayer. Lord God, we thank you for the opportunity to gather to study your word as you have inspired it. Help us to understand the message and help us to carry it forward. Amen. All right, last week, remember Mordecai and Haman had a little bit of a, shall we say, a spat with each other. Now, what caused that?
They don't like each other's ethnicity.
Well, but it was the one specific event that precipitated this. What was it?
Mordecai wouldn't honor him after he got
Right.
Promoted.
Yeah, he wouldn't bow or do anything special for him. So Haman decided, hey, he's the only guy that didn't do that. So I'm not only am I going to nail him, but I'm going to nail all of them. So that way there won't be any more that will disrespect me that way. So how did Haman decide when he was going to carry out his plot to kill the Jews? What method did he use?
He sent dispatchers to all different.
Well, before that, they had to pick the date. How did they pick the date? The word was P-U-R, which means in English lot. So they had a lottery, and they just kind of okay.
P-U-R.
Yeah.
Means lottery.
Yeah, it means lot.
Okay.
So they cast lots.
Pur is Purect or Pure.
Purim is the feast that comes out of this.
And then it says means pure.
Yeah. But P-U-R by itself means lot. So they cast lots to pick the date, and they came up with some month and whatever. It describes it in the Bible, and I'm not sure they use that calendar anymore. By the way, be careful up the street this week, because for some reason Passover is this week and not the week of Easter.
Oh, okay.
So Passover begins on Tuesday. All right, anyway, so all this is going on, and Haman's got this plot to wipe out the Jews. So how did he implement this thing? What exactly did he do? Who did he talk to?
The head boss. The king.
The king. And what did the king say?
do whatever you want.
Do whatever you want. So the king is now complicit in this. And Haman has done all of this, and Mordecai finds out about it. So that's where we are. Now, would somebody like to read Esther chapter 4, verses 9 to 11?
9 to 11. Let me see. Okay, I'll read that. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in an inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death, unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I called to go to the king.
So Mordecai is telling Esther, hey, this is what's going on, man. You might want to talk to this guy. After all, you got ins with him. And so what is she saying here?
She probably could do it, that she hasn't been there for quite a while.
No, what happens if she just shows up?
She could be put to death.
Yeah.
But
So-
she's his wife.
Yeah. Any man or a woman. So now remember, she was picked to be as the most beautiful woman in the kingdom and everything else, right? I haven't seen him in 30 days. So that tells you what kind of guy this
They're
guy
very
is.
messed up people.
It tells you what kind of guy, what this guy's doing. So what she's really saying is, hey, I haven't had a chance to even speak to the guy, and if I take a risk, this is what could happen to me. So she's got this on her mind now, and so here's what Mordecai has to say about that. Would somebody like to read verses 12 to 14?
Yeah, when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, but that you have come to a royal position for such a time as this.
For such a time as this.
So what is Mordecai saying here?
She's not gonna be exempt either, she.
Yeah, but also he's saying what about why Esther is where she is?
God placed you there on purpose.
Yeah, God placed you there on purpose. That's what you were put here for. Just for this event. So now you're worried about getting wiped out, and now you got that whole thing just heaped on your shoulders, okay? The entire future of my people is on me. And come to think of it, maybe God did put me here for this. I don't know. So I imagine she didn't get a whole lot of sleep that night. I don't know about you. But, somebody read 15 to 17. We'll see exactly what she decides to do.
I'll give it a try. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in the Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, nights or days. I and my maids will rest fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions.
Oh. So she's gonna fast and everything. That was kind of like the ultimate preparation, if you will. Fasting was considered, the ultimate sacrifice, if you will, of the human body. So basically, a lot of the festivals required fasting.
My friend's church, they still do it.
Yeah, as I say, you do this to get ready for something important. And so that Esther has decided that, yeah, hey, maybe I'm going to go ahead with this. I don't know where how it's going to go. Remember, like I told you, remember she got picked as the most beautiful woman of all the women that were brought before this guy. Okay, so here she's saying, if I show up, then that's the law. If I show up and he doesn't like it, And besides that, what happened to the last queen, who upset him, she got kicked out of town. So she's got that weighing on her mind. Also, the fact that he hasn't seen her in 30 days means he's probably got options if he wants them. So this is where this whole thing is at. So not only does Esther have to go see him, but she's got to figure out what she's going to tell him. Think about this. If she says, hey, you stupid fool, look at what you've done, he might take it the wrong way and start the process early. You never know. Well, we kind of know because it's written down, but that's neither here nor there. So Esther decides to go ahead, and this is what happens. Would somebody like to read Esther chapter 5, verses 1 to 7?
I got it. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court to the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in her court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given you." "If it pleases the king," replied Esther, "let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." "But Haman at once," the king said. so we all may do what Esther asks. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, "Now what is your petition? It will be given to you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." Esther replied, "My petition or my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them, then I'll answer the king's question."
Okay. She doesn't really tell him anything, does she? So he's already at what he's already said. He's already at one banquet, and I have a suspicion she wasn't exactly wearing an apron and doing all that stuff. But anyway, there's banquets in those days were real festive things, a lot of drinking, a lot of that going on. So what does she say? What does she say is going to happen next?
I'm doing another banquet.
She's going to have another banquet tomorrow.
And that kind of implies in here too that she used a delay tactic.
Oh yeah.
Just wait a little longer.
Well, she's also setting things up very carefully here. And now, how do you think Haman feels?
You should feel honored, I guess.
Yeah.
Invited him.
Hey, this is pretty cool stuff. I'm getting free food for not only today but tomorrow, and I'm here with the king and the queen. That makes me one of the top 3 people in this whole country, right?
For now.
For now, but you would think that, wouldn't you? If you were him.
I would get the impression too from reading this that Esther is not only very beautiful, but she's got a certain way of a grace of walking a peaceful, easygoing nature that makes it easy for the king to want her to talk to him. You know what I mean? She's got a certain kind of personality.
She conniving.
Charming. You're not stubborn, you're persistent. She's charming.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting there 2 banquets, it's gotta be something big.
Well, let's see what Haman does. So would somebody like to read chapter 5, verses 9 to 14?
I'll read it. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all, Haman added. I am the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave. And she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. His wife, Zeresh, and all his friends said to him, "Have a gallows built 75 feet high, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it, and then go with the king to the dinner and be happy." This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the gallows built.
Ah. Dave, how tall is 75 feet high? Is that taller than the flagpole out there?
Yeah.
75 feet high. How the heck you get up there? I mean, I guess it doesn't matter as long as as long as you could string a rope down.
But that was to really make a point.
Yeah,
I guess.
75 feet, and he had it built in the afternoon. I mean, imagine trying to get somebody over to your house to fix something like that. I mean, look at Mike's girlfriend's house. It took him like months to do the kitchen. And these guys built a 75-foot scaffold in an afternoon. Of course, then again, in those days, I don't know where they got the wood. wood was a little sparse out there, but, you know, then again, 75 feet high. That's tall. I mean, the gallows we used to build used to have, remember, there was a platform on there with a trapdoor, I suppose, but, you know, that's how you got up there. But, be that as it may, so Haman's got this idea, the next morning, I'm gonna go to the king, and I'm gonna ask him to take care of this, and we're gonna get it done, and I'll be a real happy guy. Now, whether this is the wine talking, or whether it's him talking at this point, who knows? Because it did say that he went out the day happy and in high spirits. We know what that means, right? So that's his plan. However, there's a little twist that takes place. Would somebody like to read Esther chapter 6, verses 1 to 9?
I'll give it again. That night the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought to him and read to him. It was found recorded that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh to the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and negotiation has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, is the tenant's answer. The king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows that he had erected for him. His attendants answered, Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now Haman brought to himself, thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? So he answered the king, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden on, with the royal crest placed on his head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the men the king delights to honor, and lead him and the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Go at once.
That was the other thing.
Go at once, the king recommended. Get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman refused him from his head covered in great grief, and told Xerxes, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him.
Okay, there we go. So, Haman figures, aha, he wants to honor somebody. Who does he think he's going to honor? Him. So he says, well, if it's going to be me, this is what I want. Right? So he thinks up this whole rigmarole of all the things that they wanted, that he wants done, and he figures, and we'll have some noble prince go ahead and lead him around. Oh boy, what a deal! How do you think he feels when he finds out it's for his trusted enemy here?
I think, like it says in here too, that the king's waking up and wanting to look at the chronicles and all that could have been something that was God put that into his head and kind of woke him up, and so then he did that.
Very possible, but it seems what is it? Leroy Jesso gives one of his rules is there's no such thing as coincidence. But it seems a little odd that on the day that Haman shows up early to get this guy hung, this happens to him. Now, how do you think he feels?
He's probably raging.
Well, yeah. Especially trying to hold a smile, leading the horse through town.
And he's embarrassed because he told everybody he thought it was gonna be him getting all those.
Yeah, well, not only that, his wife and his friends get to see it, because his gallows is in the backyard, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, this isn't the same guy who was talking to us yesterday, right? So, now, how do you think Haman is feeling? He's probably feeling like, buddy, you're gonna get yours. It may not be today, but you're gonna get yours.
But he couldn't really do it though if the king honored him.
Well, yeah, that's the whole point. See, the king, remember, the king just kind of, well, whatever you want. The king just gave him the whatever you want speech. The king hasn't put two and two together yet.
It's not kind of like, once the king makes a decree, you can't go back on it.
Right.
Or once the king honors someone, you can't go back on that either.
Yeah, well, exactly. He hasn't put two to two together yet. So here's this, the king is kind of like, well, whatever, sounds good to, whatever you say sounds good to me. Everything we've heard about this king so far is everything somebody tells him sounds good to me, just handle it.
But he figured out how to honor somebody, and thought about, well, we gotta honor this guy.
Yeah.
He thought of that himself.
Yeah, he thought of that himself, but how to do it and when to do it and everything, that was
Yeah.
somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
Any of you ever watched the TV show Carter Country? It came out when President Carter was president. It was some little town in Georgia, and they had the mayor and they had the police chief, and the police chief had his first black officer, and Keen Holiday played the black officer, and it was like a comedic Mayberry is what it was. And the mayor always had this, everybody brings stuff up to the mayor, and he can look at him and he says, okay, I think that's a good idea. Now, handle it. Now, get out of my office, That's the way this king seems to be to me. I'm too busy having fun doing what I'm doing, so if you want to take care of this, go ahead. It's up to you. By the way, there are leaders who believe that if somebody brings up an issue or a new ministry, the first thing you do is assign it to the person that brought it up to you. Then you'll find out how serious it really is. But in this case, you're dealing with the king, and he knows that the king can get a little bit upset from time to time if you don't do what he says, so I better do what he says. And can you imagine him picking up the robe and putting it on this guy? Because that was part of it. He had to put the robe on him. And then he has to put the headdress on him, and then he has to get him up on the horse. I don't know if Mordecai's ever been on a horse. And then you had to lead him through town, which means he's doing the walking, and the guy I hate more than anybody else in the world is sitting on the back of the horse that I'm leading.
And he's basically saying, this is a really great guy, this is a really great guy.
Yeah.
Everybody knows he's a good guy.
Yeah, everybody knows he's a great guy, and then his wife is probably like, what am I gonna do with you? And his friends are probably laughing at me, look at you, so, this is the morning now. All this has happened in the morning. What's going to happen later on, the same day?
Banquet.
Yeah, the banquet's coming. So, this whole thing is getting to a point where it's really getting weird. Now, would somebody like to read verses 12 to the end of chapter 6?
2 verses, or 3 verses?
Yeah.
Okay. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared.
Okay, so all this is happening in the same day. So what are the his friends telling him not to do?
They can't do anything to the Jews.
No, not the Jews, just one Jew.
Mordecai.
Yeah, don't say anything bad about Mordecai, because the king, like you just said, the king just honored this guy, and now what are we going to do? Now we're a little bit ahead, so we'll keep moving on. So Haman's on his way to this banquet now. Okay, the eunuchs came and got him. So what do you think's going through his head? You know, this would have been the perfect opportunity. You know, he missed the perfect opportunity to get this guy hanged in the morning and screwed it all up himself. So now he's got to be thinking, well, at least, right? At least this banquet's coming, and I'm one of the top. I'm one of the only 2 people that are going to be there. So I'm still an important person, right? You would think. If you were him, what would you think? Because remember, they came and got him. It's not like he had to go on his own. So he figures, well, I bet he figures, well, I'm still high on the guest list here. I guess things are going okay. So would somebody like to read chapter 7, verses 1 to 7? So let's see what really happened.
I got it. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther, and as they were drinking wine on that second day, the king again asked, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, grant me my life, this is my petition, and spare my people, this is my request. For I and my people have been sold to the destruction and slaughter and annihilation. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Who is the man who has dared to do such a thing?" Esther said, "The adversary and enemy is the vile Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. King got up with rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed beyond to beg Queen Esther for her life. Am I going further? I can't
Yeah,
remember.
just right there.
Okay.
So now the king has put 2 and 2 together. Okay, it sounds like he doesn't think things through real well now, does he? As soon as he hears this, it's like, aha, I better act now. And then he runs out of the room. Remember, he's the king. Okay, I would have thrown everybody else out of the room, but he runs out of the room. So now Haman and Esther are the only 2 people left in there.
Does she, I mean, from the way it's written in there, does she make it clear that she's Jewish?
She doesn't say that.
Doesn't say that
She
yet.
doesn't say that.
Now she doesn't say that,
So far.
but the king has figured it out, I think.
I don't think so.
So,
She says, my people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, but then other people also were,
yeah, you see,
Right.
so she doesn't. You're right. She doesn't exactly say it. It's how the king reacts that's important. Would somebody like to read verse 8 to the end of the chapter?
I'll read it. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was sprawling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." The king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided.
So he found out how high it was.
Now think about this.
He was having a very bad day.
Haman was waking up. He's going to hang the worst enemy he could think of on this gallows that he builds in his backyard. And next thing you know, before it's over, he's hanging on the gallows in his backyard. So then it said the king's fury subsided. So obviously, again, this was a banquet. There was probably some alcohol involved. He, like I said, you can tell by by what we've been reading, this guy has a tendency to overreact to everything that happens to him, or he just doesn't care. So he has made a decision. Now, notice it says Queen Esther was reclining on the couch. That's what they used to do in those days, I remember they'd recline on couches and people would feed them and all that.
Like in Cleopatra.
Yeah, and so he's hanging on the couch, it says. So he's probably on his knees, like this, begging for something, So the question that you brought up is, now that the king knows all this, and his rules cannot be disputed, what do you think, what options does he have?
They could be edict.
Well, you can make a new edict. That's exactly right. So, would somebody like to read chapter 8, verses 1 through 8?
Okay, I can do that. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the state of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if he regards me with favor, and thinks it the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have been, hanging on a pole and set up. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring, for no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked."
Okay.
Did that before.
So,
Now he definitely knows they're Jewish.
now he knows they're Jewish. But what else has happened? Who's the number 2 man now?
Mordecai.
Mordecai's number 2 man.
And he's got the ring.
And he's got the ring.
Yeah.
So, in theory, if anything happens, technically these two should be safe for now. But remember it said, no law of the king can be revoked. Very important point here. No law of the king can be revoked. So the law is already out there that on this day they're gonna wipe out the Jews. So remember what he says. Now write another decree in the king's name on behalf of the Jews as seems best to you. and seal it with the king's signet ring, for no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. So she's suggesting, you're the boss, come up with a way around this, if you will. And so then, would somebody like to read verses 9 and 10?
At once the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the 3rd month, the month of Sivan. They wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of the king Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, sent them by the mountain carriers, and rode fast horses, especially bred for the king.
So who wrote the new order? Mordecai did.
Actually, he had secretaries, I don't know if everybody could write then.
Yeah, well, I'm saying he dictated it, and however it got translated.
Yeah.
Notice how many provinces there were. 127 provinces. That's pretty big. From India to Kush, that's a big territory. And not only did they write it in every language of the people, they also wrote it in Hebrew.
Yeah.
So that the Jews everywhere would understand.
Is Cush what's now Ethiopia, I think?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So, anyway, now, the only thing is, we don't know yet what the edict said, do we? It says he wrote it, but it doesn't say what he wrote. So if someone would like to read verses 11 through 13.
Got it. King's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy a king and annihilate any armed force that any nationality or province that might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day anointed for the Jews to do this was in all the provinces of King Xerxes, was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves and their enemies.
So, you're not Jewish. Somebody just told you, the king just told you, I don't know, a couple of weeks before, wipe everybody out. Now the king says, well, wait a minute. Now the Jews can defend themselves. What are you going to do?
You're
not
become
Jewish. What's that?
You're gonna become Jewish.
Well, yeah, that's one way, but I'm just saying, if you're not Jewish, and remember the king says, I command you to wipe these people out. Then 2 weeks later he says, I command them to defend when you wipe these people out.
Decide if you want to fight or you just forget it.
Or do you want to become a Jew?
Exactly. So the point of the matter is, before we were just going to do it and that was going to be it. Now all of a sudden they're arming themselves and the king's arming them with all kinds of weapons and stuff that we don't have. And, what are we going to do now?
Was that part of what was written down? That what he told the Jews, they could arm themselves, that was part of what was written down and taken everything.
Yeah, right, exactly. So,
Okay.
so now the Jews have got time, they armed themselves, they probably picked their strongholds and everything else is going on. And now I'm on the outside, the day comes, what am I going to do? Am I going to obey the first king law or the second king law?
Is the
Which
date the same, the date that Haman chose and the date that Mordecai chose, the exact same day?
Yeah, the exact same day. So So in other words, I suppose what I could do is I could charge and, I could charge the stronghold and say, I give up. You know, I did what the king asked, he said attack, well I attacked, and now I'm giving up, there are too many of them, they're too well armed, I give up. See ya. Sorry about the inconvenience. I mean, think about this. They have been allowed to arm themselves, and now the king is kind of saying, well, you know, they can defend themselves, and they got my blessing if they do it. And not only that, if they wipe me out, they get to take care of my property.
That's pretty common in war, you get to plunder if you win.
Right. So here are the people I'm supposed to wipe out. The king told me to wipe out. Now I got to try to wipe them out. And if they beat me, I lose everything. Somehow this doesn't sound too good, does it? So in essence, this is what's happening. You asked a long time ago why everybody hates the Jews. Well, here's a case where hatred was stirred up and then sort of diffused by saying no. So instead of saying, hey, he couldn't say, forget what I told you last time, because as we know, that's not allowed. So he came up with a way that might dissuade a whole lot of people from carrying out his first order. But then again, keep in mind, who wrote it? King didn't write it. Mordecai wrote it. The king is saying, hey, you're my right-hand man. I made a mistake. Fix it. So this is how Mordecai chose to fix it. Now, let's take a look at the palace now. You think Mordecai's got a few spears and whatnot laying around just in case? Do you think anybody would dare attack the palace? I don't know what kind of zealousness there is running around. Remember, there's 127 provinces. It's kind of hard for one person to keep track of how many people paid attention and how many people didn't. But the fact that he also put the order in Hebrew is telling you what?
Wants everybody, including the Jews, to understand it.
Well, exactly. He's telling the Jews specifically what this means. Specifically. So they have the opportunity to get together and plan and do whatever is necessary. Like I said, they probably found the most fortifiable house that anybody owned, and went through all of that routine and stored the weapons, and had probably stored food and water and whatever else it took to be prepared.
They wouldn't have prepared themselves anyway from the first order?
I don't know if because it doesn't sound that way in the text. It just sounded like they lamented and wailed, but I don't know whether they actually prepared.
See, it's like the Jewish history in some ways is like, well, they never fought back. They didn't fight back that much until World War II. And maybe in some ways the Jewish people were not really that much warriors until a certain point. Now they're very much warriors in our century.
Well, actually, we will find that at this time there was also a time when they rose up. We never studied, no one's ever studied the Maccabees in the Presbyterian churches that I've been aware of. Mm-hmm. But that was the idea behind Simon Maccabee, why he was so revered, because he got the Jews to stand up to their oppressors and actually won the battle. How many of you saw the miniseries Masada? To this day, all Jewish soldiers, all Israeli soldiers, as part of their graduation, are brought to Masada. Masada was a mesa. You know what a mesa is? Mm-hmm. It's not like a mountain. It's kind of a raised flat land. King Herod had built a what do you want to call it? The summer palace, or vacation palace or whatever the heck it was up there. And the only way you could get up there was, by a basket. So there was like an elevator. And when the Romans got angry and attacked the Jews in 70 AD, a whole group of them went up on top of Masada. And, they kept repelling attacks from up there. And the Romans saw this as being, what do you want to call it? An irritant, an embarrassment. How could these Jews, how could these Jews stick around against the biggest, the most nasty military force in the world and get away with it? So they encircled this area, and they had food up there to last for years, and they had all kinds, they actually had sheep and goats, and they were raising crops up there. So they were up there for a long time, I think almost 3 years. So the only way the Romans could figure out how to get them out was to build a ramp all the way up to the top of this thing. And naturally, they were under attack the entire time they did this, especially as they got closer and closer and closer. So when they finished the ramp, and by the way, the Roman commander wasn't really happy with these orders, but when they finished the ramp, the Romans marched up there. And what do you think they found?
Jews.
Nothing.
They found nothing. What happened?
I believe the story is that they had killed themselves.
They all committed suicide rather than be taken. I mean, this is the kind of thing you're dealing with in those days. The people had it. People wanted to wipe out people.
But they're still doing it.
And they're still doing it. But back at that time, taking suicide was considered the honorable way out. They not